so much, Jen. We are now going to have our talk by Melanie Yazzie. We are switching out the laptops, so we'll have just a moment here of switching our computers, and we're also going to dim the lights a little bit further so that we can really see Melanie's vibrant artwork.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this evening to hear us speak about all these different things that are important in our community. It's really amazing to be here. It's my first time meeting Dakota and then to meet Jan, and we were talking about all these connections we have, and it's so true within Native community that our knowledge and genealogy of knowing each other just goes back. It's incredible how there's so many connections. Okay, so let me go ahead and start. I am of the Saltwater clan, born for the Bitterwater clan. My maternal grandfather's clan is Edgewater. My paternal grandfather's clan is Red Streak into the water. I grew up in northeastern Arizona on the Navajo Reservation. This is me when I was little, and my parents signed me up to do an art class at a Montessori school, and that's where I first started making paintings. And we still have the first painting I made, and it is sort of an abstract elephant. And I don't have an image of it, but it's really funny how my style has stayed the same. When I make my work, I'm always thinking about home, and I always get asked by people what my work is inspired by, and I say these are the things that inspire me, and where I get color and how I see just the world. It's every day on my walks outside, just being at peace with things that surround me. And looking at everything, like nothing is like too small to bring into the artwork. And I think a lot of times for people who think they're not artists, I say, you're an artist, you just need to look at the world in this different way and notice different things and honor it in a drawing or by just making something, thinking about that thing and bring it into being. I really incorporate a lot of animal imagery into my work. I grew up around animals, and of course we see them in a different way, and there's always a way of connecting with them and stories that we get from them. And of course I always look at the strange parts of what an animal is doing, and people always wonder how my work comes into being, and I say, well, I notice these crazy things that what the animals do, and then I try to reenact it into the piece. One thing that's really important to me, and when we're talking about Indigenous arts and how we look at things, it's our tools. Our tools are something that are really spectacular and special to us. The way that we honor our art space, and I know a lot of Native people, we're always talking about how we use our tools and who gave it to us, or when we were, I guess, at a point where we thought we deserved a certain tool. A lot of my palette knives, I remember at one point I was working with Joe Feddersen, who is a Colville artist, and he's just like amazing, and I noticed he had all these beautiful palette knives, and I said to him, like, who gave that to you? And that's so amazing. He said, I bought it. And I said, oh. And I said, well, I've always wanted one, but I thought, like, I'm waiting to get them. And he's like, Melanie, you buy them for yourself. Like, you are at that point as an artist that you can have really nice materials. And I know it sounded crazy, but as I grew up, there are certain ways in our community where you're, like, gifted things, and in my crazy mind, I thought at some point someone will say I deserve a good tool. So I always like to publicly thank Joe Feddersen for telling me, just go buy it. So I've started accumulating tools, and all my tools have a story and a connection, and that's something that often when people talk with Native artists, they say, what's important? I said, ask them about their tools. Like, what are they working with? And who gave it to them? That's not something that we talk about a lot. And what kind of space do they work in? So I share, a lot of times I'll share images of my studio and what's in the space. And then share images of how I work. Like a lot of the work, most important work takes place in the kitchen. I do a lot of different types of work. I paint, I draw, I make prints, I do ceramic work, and I'm a pretty prolific worker. When I make my paintings, I can't just focus on one painting. I'm usually working on 15 or 20 at a time, and I sort of line up a wall and sit and crawl and just really get into it. And I'm layering a lot of things together. So I'm painting and then I'm layering things back, and it goes back and forth a lot. A lot of my work is inspired by places I've traveled to. I've been to France and to Japan. And a lot of times when I travel, I will meet with younger people in the community, because I've noticed a lot of times people will ask, how do we change the perceptions of what Native people are? And I say, well, you begin with the young ones. If you take time to teach the younger ones some things about being Native, then they'll learn, and that stereotype of who we are is broken because they've seen somebody who's like this. Because a lot of times when in the early 80s and 90s, I would be invited to go speak at schools, and I would show up dressed like this, and people would always say, oh, there's a room over there, you can go put your costume on. I'd feel like, this is my costume. and then I educate them about like how we are, and the nativeness is inside and here and when I speak. And a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, that's really different. So, and so anyhow, that's why I always tell people, start working with children and they'll see things differently. I've spent time in New Zealand, traveled mostly on the North Island, and I do a lot of collaborative work with other artists. This is with my friend Sue Pearson from Norfolk Island, and this was the piece that was for the program, so I thank the DU for using it. Sue and I are very honored that it's announcing this program. We collaborated on a lot of projects where our images are crossing over each other, and every time we're making things, we're sharing story. This is Sue, and this was a project that we put together in New Zealand. I think it was in 2012. And it was funny because we spent like a couple of weeks making all this work, and I was still on Facebook at the time. I'm no longer on it, no more social media. But it was, what was really wonderful about it was we were saying, oh, it would be so great to have an exhibition. And we said, we don't know how to do it. So then I wrote on Facebook, I'm in New Zealand, where could we exhibit this work? And a Maori woman in Gisborne contacted us, and we drove the work there and had an exhibit. It was really great. When I was in New Zealand, I kept running into a lot of Hawaiian artists, and they kept asking me, like, well, how come you don't come to Hawaii? How come we always see you in Aotearoa, which is the Maori word for the long white, the island of the long white cloud? And I said, well, the Maori send a plane ticket. So then the Hawaiians were like, oh, okay, we'll get you one. So I ended up in Hawaii for 18 days and worked with Miley Andrade. And again, a lot of the work was outdoors. Like, we made work in the studio, but then she was like, I want to take you to my island on Kauai. We need to go walk to see these different plants that we're talking about. And then, oh my God, and it was really great. It's really great to work with natives also because we always want food. So when we're at the residency, every day all the artists brought their specialty for lunch, and we would share food, and it was just, it's this bonding time. This is Miley Andrade making her prints. I've spent time in Italy, in Venice, and when I was there, I spent most of the time writing the Vaporetto, because a lot of the work that I do is about getting to know a community and getting out of the studio. So while a lot of the other artists were in the studio fighting for time on the printing press, I was out meeting people in the community, and a lot of the work was about the vaporados and the numbers. And so when we had our opening, a lot of people came, and a lot of the locals were talking with me, and the other artists told me, like, why are they all talking to you? And I said, well, you guys were in here making stuff. We were out there riding the boats and getting to know everyone in the community, eating at their restaurants, talking to them. And it's happened when I've gone to France. I've taught my students the same thing. Go and see the community, get to know the people, who makes this certain food, how do they make it, honor them, and that will be reciprocated when you have your opening. They'll come, they'll be with you. I've traveled to Australia, and again, when I was there, I had this older woman come, and I was at the university, and she said, my name is Georgina Chicken, and I have these little Aborigine grandchildren that need to meet a Native American. Will you come to our school? And so I went there and worked with those children. And every time in different places, I'm trying to make prints and make art with community and hear their stories, and just share with them how I make my work. We do this a lot here in the U.S. I travel to different universities being a visiting artist. This is at Northern Illinois University. This is up in Walla Walla, Washington. And the pieces just come to me by, on walks, and I think of different things. This is actually at DU with Catherine Chavon. She was kind enough to grain a couple of lithostones for me and make these beautiful lithographs. I think it's been a couple of years now, but it was really beautiful because she had had these stones ground for me, and then when I walked in the studio, there was a big old sign on the stone that said, if you are not Melanie Yazzie, do not touch this stone. And I always wish I would have photographed that sign because it was such a beautiful honor, and then to make prints with her was really great. Here's the other one. But this is like what we look for as printmakers when we go into shop. This setup is like printmaking porn. We're like, oh my god, time for studio making stuff. It's funny, when I do this presentation on the res, I always include like us butchering a sheep, and I can hear all the Navajos in the room going, So these are examples of some of my paintings that were up at Regis a couple years ago. This actually belongs to your son, that piece. Ben, we went to his place, and he owns this piece. But these are all pieces honoring waterways and pathways, and these bowls are symbolic of when we have ceremony, you're collecting water and food in these bowls. I've spent a lot of time at the Denver Art Museum. I love the people there, the work that they do, and the community that they bring into the museum. And it's funny, I always tell my students, sometimes the most important things I see in the museum are the shadows that are cast by the pieces. When I was at my residency there, I sort of just went crazy making work. And a lot of times when I'm in that crazy place, I'll have people who say, well, you don't really have to do this much. And I'd say, well, it took me a lot to get to this point where I've got this invitation to be here. So I feel like a responsibility to really absorb it and make. This is my beautiful husband, Clark Barker, helping me carve some of these giant plates that we worked on. And again, inviting community and talking with people. I think when we talk about displaying and getting Native work out there, I always ask people, make sure to bring community in. What is the educational aspect of your exhibit that you're working on? How can you put a real Native person out front and have them interact with people to dispel the stereotypes that are out there? It was the first time I listened to Bose headphones. I thought it was stupid, and then my friend in New Zealand put them on me, and I said, Oh, yeah. But in New Zealand, what was beautiful about making work there was they understood what I was talking about with my drawings. I said I was doing these drawings of stacks of rocks that reminded me of these connecting points at home during the summer when ceremonies happen and the writers go out and there's this meeting that happens. You never know where it's going to happen, and then these rock stacks get placed. And when I was growing up, we would come across them, and then we'd stop to either do a prayer or make a wish and add a rock to the pile. And so I was telling my friends in New Zealand, I said, our meeting was like that. It was like this meeting. So I wanted to do a series of pieces about the rocks and the riverways and the places that we're going. And then they said, well, we should go to some of the riverways. We should collect the rocks. We'll collect the water from each of the rivers. We'll bring those into the exhibition. And this is part of how the exhibit was shown. And it was wonderful because we would begin every day by going for hikes and going out to different bodies of water to collect things, and then we'd stay there, and then they would talk about the stories of what each thing was, and then we brought it into the space. I collect a lot of rocks, and often when I'm leaving Aotearoa or any place, I have to make sure to gift some of the rocks back. I think we were at the Auckland airport once, and my husband said, your bags are so heavy, are there rocks in here? And I was like, yes. So that's more of my paintings and work. When I do these presentations, I just like to show a lot of images so people can see where I'm coming from. This is a solo exhibit I had at the University of New Mexico Museum in Albuquerque, and the curator, Lisa Tamaris Becker, has since passed, but she asked to feature my work in Albuquerque, and I was like so excited. And it was funny because people would always say, like, when do you know you've made it as an artist? And there's so many artists who say, oh, I want to be in New York or Los Angeles, and I'm like, I want to be in Albuquerque. Because when we grew up, Albuquerque was the big city. Like, we would go there to buy our clothes once a year for school, and like everything was about going to Albuquerque and going swimming. And to be at the University Museum there was like really incredible. We had the opening, and I remember them saying, we're not sure how many people will show up, but you should invite your family. And I was like, great. And we had the opening, and it was one of the largest openings they've had. There was over 700 people who came to the opening, and it was amazing because it was mostly Native people. And a lot of people were like, we've not seen Native artwork in the school, and we wanted to see who this Yazzie was, and I was like, yeah, it's me. And I love to share the story because so many people came to see the work, and also what was really incredible was that if you don't know, the Tamarind Institute is like world famous for lithography. They're across the street from the museum, and that night they had an opening. And at one point during the evening, I remember watching the door, and I saw the people come, the master printers from Tamarind come in, and I was like, oh my God, it's Rodney, it's Bill Latuga, it's Lily, and my mom was like, well, who's that? And I said, they're all the people from the Tamarind. And so I ran over to say hello to them, and they said, Melanie, we had an opening tonight, but nobody was at our opening. And everybody was talking about this, so we closed ours up early and came over to be with you. And I was just like, yes, top of the world. So this exhibit was just incredible because it featured a lot of all my different artworks and sculptures. And then I always remember where the lines and the things are inspired from, is flying from place to place across the country. When I was in 15, I went to a Quaker boarding school outside of Philadelphia, and so I spent a lot of time flying back and forth for school and then looking out the window of like the landscape changing, and I incorporate that into the work. Most recently, a lot of the works that I've been making have incorporated numbers from being a type 2 diabetic, so I put my blood sugar numbers in the work to talk about that. but there's just layers and layers of meaning within the work, and there's different stories. And again, you can see how I work like this maniac. This is my studio wall. One of the most recent artist residencies I've had was at Colorado College. Polly Norstand is the curator there. She selected me for a Mellon artist residency, and it came with an award of $25,000. It was amazing, and they gave me this classroom space to work in, and I spent 6 weeks there just making. And there's an exhibit that's at Colorado College. It's gonna close at the end of this month, but a lot of the works from this residency are in that exhibit. A lot of times, again, this was an exhibit at the Wheelwright Museum in Santa Fe. And this is where I work at CU Boulder. This is the print shop that I oversee and take care of. And I've named a lot of the lithostones after people I admire. I pay a lot of tribute to my dogs. The black one's Luna, the tan one is Sombra. They have since passed, and we have a whole new crew of dogs now. Top one is Gus Gus. This little baby is Tidbit. She was chewing her foot, so we put a sock on her. And this is our most recent one. That's BB. But they keep me sane and keep me grounded. And then that other guy is my husband, Clark. And he helps me when we travel to different places, put exhibits up. And I end with just how family and your partners and people who help you make your work are really important. And when you're looking at Native art, it is about family, it is about community, and it's about teaching each other and being humble. So like all of us said, like we asked for permission to be here, we're expressing our point of view. No one person in our Native community speaks for everybody. We just humbly do it, and we try to do it in a good way. And my mom and dad are Albert and Bessie Yazzie, and they just always told me since I was really little, like, the reason you do things are for the young ones, and to be present and think about that when you're making your work. And if you're ever in a difficult situation with your work, because we're all in education, they say, think of how does it benefit the students? How does it benefit them? And when your decision is made with putting them first, then it makes the decision making a lot easier. And that's what I want to say about this program here, is that you began in such a beautiful way by having a beautiful song offered, and the dean sang such beautiful, eloquent words. I think at the reception earlier, I said, "Can you tell my people up at CU Boulder?" Of course, this is being recorded, so they're probably doing a good job up there too. But I hadn't experienced what I had here at my school, and that was so beautiful to hear how that was introduced, and the care that we've been given with putting this panel together has been really wonderful. So there's lots of different things that are changing already within the way things are being presented, and with your new hire, kudos to you, like, to get you here. More and more of us are coming up, and when I was going to school, like, I was hungry for these types of conversations, and I couldn't find them. So to have you recording this and for us to be sharing, it's so wonderful. And we should get on with the questions. All right, thank you.